Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Yud in Yevmot, as we learn again for Shlomo ben Rachel, Yosef Azriel ben Chaim Michal, and Elazar ben Reuma. So we got up to the second line of the Daf Yud Amud Aleph yesterday. We're at the second line, and what is our discussion about? The question was, why was only 15? Levi asked Rebbe, why were only 15 cases? I have a 16th case. What's the 16th case? If a brother marries his father's mistress. Reuven married his father's mistress. His father wasn't married to her. Reuven then married her, and now he fell yibum. But it turns out fell yibum. Now when Reuven married her, Reuven was a legitimate son, and he married her, and he died with no children. And now she fell yibum to Shimon, her son from being a mistress. That's her son. So that's another case. She can't marry her, and it's Sarah also. And that was the question. Then why don't you say that case? So first thing, Mar says, well, that only works. That only works according to the Rabbanan, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're allowed to marry your father's mistress. So it doesn't work, and we're not dealing with machlokas. In that case, would only work out according to the Rabbanan that Reuben is allowed to marry his father's mistress. It's not his mother, and Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold to that. Then the Gemara says, well, but there is a machlokas about it. We do have machlokas, and no. Then the Gemara said, well, wait a minute. What about Reb Chia? Reb Chia said that the 15 cases in the Mishnah also work out to be cases, the complicated cases that we discussed yesterday. It can work out two sisters, fall yibum to two brothers, call them Levi and Yehuda, and each one can marry the other sister, because one of them is, let's say, one of them is Levi's mother-in-law, one of them is Yehuda's mother-in-law, or one of them is Levi's daughter-in-law, and one of them is Yehuda's daughter-in-law. So either way, it works out that the one that's Levi can marry one and Yehuda can marry the other, and that works. And they're two sisters. And Rechia said all 15 cases work out in the Mishnah. And the last case, or the second to last case, that only works according to Reb Shimon. So you see, you do have a machlokas. So Gemara says, what do you drain me a cup of Rechia? The first answer was El Rebbe Hani Klai Leslie in the second line of Daf Yud. He says, okay, that's Reb Chia. Reb Chia says all 15 cases can work out a case of two sisters falling yibum to Yehuda and Levi and Yehuda, and one can marry one can marry the other. And that only works out in all 15 cases if there's a machloka, if you say that like Reb Shimon, which means that the Mishnah does have machlokas in. So Rebbe will say, okay, I don't hold the Reb Chia. I just said the 15 cases, and I just have the 15 cases, and I'm not dealing with any machlokas in, therefore leave me, this is a Reb Yehuda, Rabbana, I'm not going there. The 15 cases, Reb Chia says it works out. I don't say it works out. El Rebbe Hani Klai Lesei. Rabada. Now we start. This is where we're picking up from today. Ravada Karichna Kamed Tana Amar. He says a different answer. Mishmei the Rava. I'll tell you what he's the name. Rabbi says, "Well, Mr. Rabbi Aniklai." I take it back. Rabbi does hold the Rabbi of these rules. The 15 rules do apply. And this is what he said to him. In other words, it's not a question of machlokasin or not machlokasin. He can hold these 15 cases. Imo and Nusasav doesn't work out in the 15 cases for a different reason. I'm not looking at the fact Rebbe doesn't hold them. Rebbe does hold of the klal of Rav Chia, and maybe it works out even in a machlokas. If it works out in a machlokas, but I'll tell you the problem. He's got a very simple answer. You, Levi, are trying to tell me, why don't you have a 16th case, right? Where Reuven married his father's mistress. Yeah, you could have a case like that, of Reuven married his father's mistress. That could be a case, but it doesn't work out into Rav Chia's issues. Why? I'll tell you what, very simply. He might hold the Rav Chia, but you know why he doesn't say that 16th case? Because he holds a Rav Chia that you have to have all 15 cases, but when Reuven married his father's mistress, that doesn't work out of the 15 cases of Rav Chia, meaning you can't have two sisters falling yibum and Yehuda marries one and Levi marries the other one. Why? Listen carefully. Because if Reuven marrying his father's mistress, right? What happened? His father, who was Reuven's father? Yaakov. Yaakov had two. Let's say the case of Yaakov had two daughters. Meaning, what are we dealing with here? The Gemara tells us. The Gemara goes into explain it now. Look inside. Doesn't work out with two sisters. How? Let's say Yaakov had two mistresses. Right? Two sisters. and he had two mistresses, and they were both sisters. He slept with two sisters. There's no problem. I mean, it's a problem. You shouldn't sleep with people if you're not married to them. But there's no Isser Chorus there. It's not like he's not doing Kedushin either way. He slept with two sisters, and each one of them on us, right? He slept with two sisters, and they each had a child, right? Rashi gives us the case, and from these two sisters, he had two children, Yehuda and Levi and Yehuda. Yeah, but us, so it works out okay. Why? Because what's the case here? The Yaakov had slept with two sisters, right? And those were his mistresses, and he had two sons, Yehuda and Levi. Now what happens? You're talking about a case where a son can marry his father's mistress. Okay, so Reuben and Shimon now, who are legitimate sons of Yaakov, married these two women. Married the two women who were his father's mistress's daughters. Okay, now Reuben and Shimon died, right? That's the case we're talking about. Two sisters, Reuben and Shimon died, and they left these two women to Yehuda and Levi. So you might say, well, what talked about before? Yehuda can marry one, Levi can marry the other. No, one of them is the mother of Levi, one of them is the mother of Yehuda. So you have two sisters falling Yibum, like Rav Shapiro said, all 15 second show you two sisters falling Yibum. And one marries Levi, one marries Yehuda. But over here, Levi and Yehuda, neither one of them can marry either one of them. One of them is his mother, and one of them is his mother's sister, right? Sister. So you can't marry either one of them. So that doesn't work out. Rav Shapiro was talking about cases where two girls fell, right? One was Levi's mother-in-law, and one was Yehuda's mother-in-law. So Levi can marry Yehuda's mother-in-law. Yehuda can marry Levi's mother-in-law, taking the first case as an example of yesterday, right? We could do that. But over here, it doesn't work out. If Yaakov married two sisters, or slept with two sisters, let's call it, and they had two sons, Yehuda and Levi, and then they married Reuben and Shimon died, and they fell Yibum to Levi and Yehuda. You say, well, did they fall Yibum in that case? Yeah, because they're sons of the same father. It doesn't make any difference if it was wedlock or out of wedlock. They're all Yibum works with sons from the same father. They fell Yibum to Yehuda and Levi. But in this case, it's not a case where Levi can marry one and Yehuda can marry the other one. Neither one can marry either one of the two women, because one of them is his mother and one of them is his mother's sister. So it turns out, yes, two sisters are falling, and they're both Shomeret Yavam at the same time. Shomeret, I mean that they're both Yavamas waiting to get Yivmas. You can't say one's mutter to one, one's the other, one's mutter to the other. You don't have that. Let's say, I'll give you a different case. Let's say Yaakov married two women who were unrelated to one another, not married. He slept with two women who were unrelated to one another, and he had Yehuda and Levi. Okay, they were also two. He had two sons from these two mistresses, and what then? Then Reuben and Shimon married their father's mistresses, and they died. The same thing. They fall to Yehuda and Levi. Now here you do have a case. Now what do you have in this case? You have a case of Sur Lazeh, Muteros Lazeh. You have, right? Do you have that? So eBay's nachrias anas Hasur Lazeh Muteros Lazeh Mishkachas La. You're right. The one is mutter. This one is that one. But achos sheyivim lo mishkachas. They're not sisters. Why? Because they didn't have the same mother. In the case before, they had the same mother. Right? Yeah, you had the same, not the same mother. Rashi says, right? You don't have that. And the other case, I'm reading I read the wrong Rashi before. And V'nasim b'nei barim isha acheres, v'naflu lifnei b'neim asur zeh matasam mishkachas la. You do find that out. You do have that. Aval lava chayos nina. They're not sisters because they're not sisters. Ve'ikir milsa Rav Chia b'shum yibam shtei achayos naka. Rav Chia's whole case was where the two were sisters and they fell yibam to the two brothers Levi and Yehuda, and one can marry them. One can marry one can marry the other, and it's not usher. But over here, if he married two people who weren't sisters, right? So they're not sisters. You know, if Yaakov married two women who are not sisters, right? They're not sisters. They're unrelated to one another. No, had relations. I'm sorry. He slept with them. He had relations with them. And now Reuben and Shimon married those two women, right? Because the father wasn't married to them. Reuben and Shimon married them. Reuben and Shimon died. And these Levi and these two women fall Yibam to Yehuda and Levi, right? What do you say over there? You do have, because each one can marry the other ones. Each one can marry the other ones. The one who's not his mother, right? Not his mother. But those two women aren't sisters. Why? Why? Because they're not sisters. Exactly right. They're not sisters, right? Okay. So therefore, definitely not. So therefore, and that's what was saying over here. Okay. So therefore, it doesn't work out in this case. In other words, therefore, he's saying that's why he wasn't included. It could be Rebbe holds of Reb Chia. And you could have, but you know why it's not mentioned, why he doesn't have that in the, because that case doesn't work out. So he says, and therefore, that's why he doesn't include it in the Mishnah. In other words, we're saying now, yes, Rebbe holds of Reb Chia. And Reb Chia says that all 15 cases in the Mishnah can work out a case of two sisters falling Yibam and Yehuda can marry one, Levi the other. The reason he doesn't mention it in the Mishnah, not because of machlokas and yes or machlokas, and it doesn't work out like we just explained. Rav Ashi Amar la'olam lesle Rebbe had a. No, we're going to go back to the first way that Rebbe doesn't hold of Rav Chia's who will pluk the kamairi, and he is talking about machlokasin. So the question is, why didn't Levi asked Rebbe, why didn't you include the 16th case of marrying your father's mistress? Why did Rebbe say, I think this guy's got no brain in his skull? My sister. What are you trying to say? You said that the Mishnah, if you would say the 16th case, who does that case work according to? According to the Rabbanan, not Rav Yehuda, because Rav Yehuda says that you can't marry your father's mistress, right? You can't marry your father's mistress. So according to Rav Yehuda, that 16th case doesn't work out. In other words, there's a 16th case where that's just a simple case, not with the two and the two, just a simple case. A father, Yaakov, had a mistress, okay? And Yaakov had a mistress, and from this mistress, he had a son, Shimon. He had a son, Shimon, right? And now Reuven married his father's mistress. So when Reuven dies with no children, she falls Yibam to Shimon. Can't marry his mother. So why don't you say that case too? The answer is that works only according to Rabbanan. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Reuven cannot marry his father's mistress. And our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. He says, you know what? I'll tell you why it's not because of machlokasin, not machlokasin, Rav Chia, forget all that. Rebbe doesn't hold the klalim, and we'll look to the kamairi, he's talking about machlok. So the reason it's not in the Mishnah is a different reason. He says, what, you know why you got no brain in your skull? The kamalei, my kamalei, why don't you look at careful Mishnah? The Mastis and Rabbi Mishnah goes like a beautiful. What? The also Banusa who says that you can't marry your father's mistress, Diktani. The next Mishnah, Daf Yomi, which we're going to have in a couple of days on Sunday, says, Shesh Arayis, remember we've mentioned this before, the 6 Arayis, Chamur Sme'ela, which are more stringent than these 15. They can't marry, they can't marry any of the brothers. So and therefore, it's say Mataris, they can't fall Yibam to you. These 6 cases, one of them is your father's wife and your mother, etc. Right? So Mataris. What are the first 3? Imo, your mother, your father's wife, and your uncle, your father's sister. Now, in those cases, they can never marry any of the brothers, right? None of them can marry your father. They can't ever marry your brothers from your father's side. Your mother, they can't marry. It's your father's wife. So he says over here, right? Can't marry them, so they can never fall Yibam, and therefore they're tsaras if they married somebody else. As we said, if your mother's married to Shmerel and he dies, right? You could marry the co-wife of your mother because there was no Yibam over there, right? You could marry. Now, my imo, what is that first case? Imo, Elam in the stuff, it means your father's wedded wife. Hainu Eishasavav. That's Eishasavav. Elolav Anusav. It must mean Anusasavav. Viktanim Neishain Nesuas Lacherim. They can only marry somebody else. Lacherim Ein Lachem Lo. Who holds that? Man Shamas Leidis Leasvar. Who holds that you cannot marry your father's mistress? Right? They can only marry somebody else. They can't marry you as a son. That's Rav Yehuda. Also, that's why it wasn't mentioned. In other words, you want to know why didn't you mention the case of marrying your father's mistress? Well, Rav Yehuda doesn't hold of it. In our Mishnah, we just prove holds like is Rav Yehuda because the next Mishnah says Imo and Eishasaviv. What's the thing Imo and Eishasaviv? If Imo means your wedded mother, your mother was wedded to your father, that's Eishasaviv. Doesn't make right. If it's your mother or not, Eishasaviv either way. Eishasaviv means whether you're the son of that mother or not. Either way, It's Eishes Aviv. So what do you have to say both cases for? Elamai imo means even if it's unwedded, and that's Anusas Aviv. And it says over there that that can't fall yibum to you. Why not? Why can't one of your brothers marry your mother who's an unwedded mistress of your father? That means because it goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. That's why you can't say the 16th case. Listen to this. According to Rabbi Yehuda could also work out. Why? Rabbi Yehuda says you can't marry your father's mistress, right? But let's say you did. You did. The pasuk says, "Lo yigal kanaf." So you're over in a lav. The kedushin's chal. The kedushin is valid, right? Because when there's here's the key. If there's no kores, kedushin's chal. I'll give an example. Can a Kohen marry a grusha today? Okay, let's say he does. Is the marriage valid? It is. Does he need a get? He needs a get. If you marry your sister today, is the kedushin valid? No. Do you need a get? No. You understand? The difference is if you're chayiv kores, we'll see according to Rabbi Kiva even a law, but in general, the accepted rule of the halacha is this is what most of the rabbis hold in the Gemara, that if there's an isser kores like marrying your brother's wife where there's children, that's isser kores. Kedushin doesn't work. If it's only Mr. Lav, it's a losa, so you get malchus for it. A Kohen marries a grusha, Kohen gadol marries an almana, you marry a mamzeres, a regular person marries a mamzeres. It's kedushin lav, kedushin's chal. So he says over here, Amalei Ravina Ravashi, according to Rabbi Yehuda, could also work out, even though he says he can't marry your father. If he did it, you're not supposed to marry your father. It's over a lot, but if he did it, so he answered him. He says, we're not talking about if he was over, if he did something. We're talking about basic halacha. According to the Rabbanan, you can marry your father's mistress l'chadchila. There's nothing wrong with marrying your father's mistress, right? As long as he wasn't married to her. And Rabbi Yehuda says you can't, but if he did, okay. But if he did, we're not talking. Amalei Rav Shapiro Rav Kana. This is a strange Gemara. Rav Shapiro Rav Kana below the nami mishkachasla. Even if you didn't marry your father's mistress, it could also work out. How? Listen to this weird case. Yaakov Anas Kalaso. Yaakov has a son, Reuven. He's got a daughter-in-law, and he raped his daughter-in-law. Okay, he slept with his daughter-in-law. Well, that's chayv kares, right? He's not married to her. The marriage doesn't work. It's chayv kares. But hold me on a ben. They had a son. What's that son called? Mamzer. All right, let's call him Mamzer. And now he had a legitimate son, Reuven, who was the husband of this daughter-in-law. Umeis Reuven. Now Reuven dies. Okay, Reuven dies with no children. Who's his brother? Mamzer, right? And Mamzer falls yibum below bottom v'nafla kamei bra. And now she fell. His wife, Reuven's wife, who's Yaakov's daughter-in-law, now fall yibum to her own son, the Mamzer, right? She gave birth to him, right? So it says umigu the Yasuras, and she's asur. She can't marry her own son. So Rasanami Asira. So there's another case there too, even according to Yehuda. We're talking about regular brother. We're not talking about a brother that became a brother via mamzeris. Interesting, you see though that he's still a brother. For example, if the father dies, they get a Yerusha. He's still a son. He's still a son, even though he's a mamzer. And even though the father was not wed to the mother, couldn't be wed to the mother. It's his daughter-in-law, right? So he says, okay, that's a weird case. We're not talking about an Isser. The Afal Pikain, listen, even though Levi was now refuted by Rebbe, for all these reasons that we've said, it's a machlokas, I'm not dealing with a machlokas, it is a machlokas, it doesn't work out according to Rabbi Yehuda and all that. Afal Pikain, Batka Levi, Batka doesn't mean check, he inserted, Batka Levi Masdisen, he put it into his own brises. He did include, in other words, when he in his brises, which were additions to the Mishnah, he included the 16th case. The Tani Levi, Imo, your mother, sometimes if your mother fall to you to Yibam, how can that be? In the case we just described, right? You married, Reuben married his father's mistress, right? And now he dies, and his father's mistress had given birth to Shimon, his brother, and he falls in Yibam, that's his mother. So your mother, sometimes she patters the tzar, and sometimes she doesn't. Kate said, if your mother was married to your father, and you marry your brother from your father, how could he have done that? That would be the Isser. Your brother from your father can never marry your father's legitimate wife, whether your father's dead or alive, right? You can't do that. It's Karas. So Umeis, Zui Moshe, but she doesn't. So then when your mother falls to you, I mean, he married her, right? Your brother went and married her anyway, but the marriage doesn't work. It's not valid. It's not hal, as we've described. It's in the Shakares. So in that case, if the mother fell to you, she didn't really fall to you. She doesn't part to the tzara because she was never really married. Never really married. Like he says, she's not really the father. She's not really the wife of your brother anyway. Your brother married her, lived with her. Maybe they got a.
Is there a tzara?
No, yeah, there's a tzara because your brother had another wife. Your brother had a legitimate wife, But that wife, you understand? That okay, you understand? So, and that wife, could you marry that wife now? Your brother Reuben, can you marry? Yes, you can, because she's the only legitimate wife over there. That your brother was sleeping with your mother is not legitimate. No, there was kedushin to the tzara. There was no to the other one. To the mother, there was no kedushin. He says, therefore it doesn't part to the tzara because your mother didn't really fall yibum to you.
No, but that's what I'm saying.
In effect, she was never married.
Not the tzara,
exactly, she was effectively she wasn't. Kate, exactly. Kate said, your mother who was married to your father, and married your brother, married your brother, which is not really a marriage, and now your brother dies. She doesn't, like you say, she's not really a tzara because the marriage is never chal. However, like Levi said, according to the Rabbanan, not according to Rav Yehuda, right? Because we said Namish doesn't work with Rav Yehuda. Let's say your mother though was your mother because she was your mistress of your father. Now she married your brother Reuven, and he died. She patches the tzara. Why? Because Reuven had a legitimate wife, and he also had a wife who was his father's mistress, which was also legitimate. Because according to Rabbanan, you can marry your father's mistress. And then, since you can't marry her, and now she's falling Yibam to Shimon, her own son, right? That's what happened over here. She married falling Yibam, her own son. Again, what happened? Yaakov had a mistress. No problem with that. Now, Reuven married his father's mistress, and he had another wife called Sarah. We'll call Sarah the Sarah, easy called Sarah, right? And now Reuven dies with no children. Both women fall Yibam to Shimon. But one of them is his mother, and since he can't marry his mother, the tzara is also pater. That's the point. Even though our Mishnah said only 15 cases, don't do like this. So that's what. So Levi held. There is the six. No, basically there is a 16 case according to the Rabbanan who say that you can marry your father's mistress. According to Yehuda, also, if you marry the father's mistress, 16 case work out, but we're not talking about if you did a Averas or a worse Avera, like Yaakov slept with his daughter-in-law and had a son from that and had a mamzer. That's also there. Amalei Rish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish always argued with Yochanan. He said, listen, Levi Damar the Nami Tani. According to Levi, who said, well, remember he said, if he married her, according to Rav Yehuda, means you're not supposed to marry your father's mistress, but if you did, so it would work out. The Inami, Tani, you mentioned, remember, Levi said, well, what about the E? We said, Ravina said to Rav Ashi, according to Rashi, Rav Yehuda, Nami Mishkachsla, the E over, right? If he was over, even according to Rav Yehuda, if you did marry your father's mistress, it would work out too. Why? Because if you marry your father's mistress, even according to Rav Yehuda, you're not supposed to, but the Kedushin's chal. And therefore, it could very well be that your mother does fall to Yibam, like the same case, right? That the Reuven married his father's mistress. According to Rabbanan, it's legitimate. According to Rav Yehuda, you're not supposed to, but if you did, it's a marriage. So according to, if you're talking about even when there was an Aveira, according to Rav Yehuda, what about this? Listen to another case. Now we're getting into this. Once you do Chalitza, right, you're supposed to do Yibam or Chalitza. If you do Chalitza like we do today, then there's an Isser to marry her again. Afterwards, let's say you change your mind. I may change my mind. I want to do Yibam now. You don't do that. The Inami according to Levi, you even if you did an error, listen to Vimto. Let's list this case. If a person gives chalitza to his yivama, b'chazer a kitcha, and then he married her again, umeis below bottom, and now is without children. Demigu di asura, since she's usher, because once she's chalutza, the rule is once she's chalutz, you don't marry her anymore, right? You're not supposed to marry her. So let's say in that case, and he married her anyway. Demigud Iyasura, she's also Tsarosanami, so say that case too. So why don't you list this case? If you marry the Chalutza afterwards, you know why? Because once you marry, let's say there were 10 sons, right? And there were 10 sons, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yud, etc. And Reuben had 10 wives, right? And Reuben dies with no children. 10 wives, couldn't produce one child. And he dies. So what happens? So one of the brothers has to make even more chalitza to one of the wives, right? One of the wives. Let's say they're all legitimate, right? But once he does chalitza on one, right? Once you do yibum on one, you don't have the other. We'll talk about that case. What happens if you did? But okay, so according to Rish Lakish holds us. We'll see that once you do chalitza on one, the other ones is also as eishesach. It's chorus. Kedushin's not chal. So he says, why don't you list this case too? If you did chalitza on one, and then he married her, he himself, the kedushin would be chal, even though you're not supposed to. It's a lav. But for the other brothers can't marry them. It's like eishesach with children. So why don't you say, okay, the bigger the Yisur, since she's also and all the other brothers, so he said, because in the case of the mission is, we said, what happens if that Sarah goes and marries another brother, and then she dies, and then he dies, the other brother dies, and that Sarah and the Sarah are also usher. And if that Sarah goes and marries one of the other brothers, going on and on. But here it can't work because the Sarah is not allowed to marry any of the brothers because the first surviving brother already did chalitza. So you can't do. So there's no more. Can't. So he says it doesn't work out. That case doesn't work out. Ain't of it Sarah. That's what Rabbi Yochanan answered him. So Gemara says, "Why don't you simple answer? Wait a minute. If you did chalitza already, the isser to marry him again afterwards, the isser for any of the brothers is only a lav. It's not kares, according to Rabbi Yochanan. So why don't you just say that doesn't work out? That's not a 16th case. You know why? Because we're talking about the cases in the Mishnah are that you can the one that she fell yibum to he cannot marry her because it's his daughter or his mother-in-law or his daughter-in-law or whatever, right? It's one of the cases. But you could marry the other brothers, right? You could marry the other brothers. So, right, to this one it fell. So if there was another brother, the other brother can marry him. But in this case, he can't marry any of them. But in this case, the chalitza of yibum, if he just did chalitza to one of them, the other brother's kedushin would be chal. You still need yibum chalitza. Meaning, if one brother did chalitza, let's say some goes, Reuven dies, no children. Shimon does chalitza on her, right? And then he marries her. Is the kedushin chal? According to Rabbi Yochanan, it is chal. And if he dies, even though he's not supposed to, if he dies, the next brother Levi would have to do chalitza or yibum because it was a valid marriage. So why don't you say simply, what do you mean? Because it doesn't work out because there's no tzara. The answer is Ledvar of Kamalei. Rabbi Yochanan was answering according to Rish Lakish's only opinion. Lididi, as we're going to see in the Gemara, Lididi, I Rabbi Yochanan hold Chayv Elav and Haim, Chayv Elav and Echalitza Venenu, Chayv Venenu, and therefore it's not mentioned in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about cases of Kares. The 15 cases are that you can't the brother Shimon, the surviving brother at that point, Shimon cannot marry one of them, and therefore the tsar is let's say the tsar goes and marries the other one, goes on and on and on. But in this case, where Shimon married her after he did chalitza and then he dies, the other brothers could do even more chalitza because it's a legitimate marriage, even though he's over on the essay of once you give her chalitza, you're not supposed to marry her. Ella, the didoch, but according to you, Rish Lakish, chayv krisis ninu. All the other brothers are chayv kares. Once one brother does chalitza, the other brothers cannot marry her or any of the co-wives because it's an Isser Kares. It goes back to the original Isser Eishazach as if there was children, as if it's Eishazach with children. Chayv krisis ninu, right? So according to you, that you hold that El Didoch, it's Chayv krisis, and it could fit into the Mishnah. I'll tell you the reason it's not included in the Mishnah is Lefi Shein but Sar. The case of Sar doesn't work out, and that's why I included. Here we have the machlokus. Now that actual machlokus, if a person gives chalitza, Shimon gives chalitza to Reuben's widow, then he married her. Amarish Lakesh, who ain't a chayav ala chalutza kares. If he marries her now, after he gave her chalitza, and he wants to marry her now, he's not chayav kares for her. But if the other brothers marry her subsequently, they're chayav kares. But the tsar, once you give chalitza to one wife, to one of the co-wives, let's say Leah, and now you want to marry the co-wife, you decide to give her chalitza, I want to give the other wife, I want to marry her. He says, you know what, chayav kares on both of them. Whether the one who gave the chalitza, the brother who gave the chalitza is chayav kares, or any of the other brothers is chayav kares. They're all chayav kares. That's Rish Lakish's opinion. We always hold like Rabbi Yochanan in general. Rabbi Yochanan or no, beinu bein achim, whether him or the brothers, ain't a chayav al chlos, chutzikos v'lat sar kares. Doesn't work. Once you give chalitza, okay, you're not supposed to marry on them. But if you did, or any of the brothers did, there's no kares there. You're over in a lav or over in an assay. It's not guess. It's a loshe that came out of a lav, but there's no kares there. Not chayiv kares. Lots of kares. My time at Rish Lakish. What's Rish Lakish's reason? Rish Lakish says, "Amar Pasuk says, asher lo yivne." Once you give chalitza, the pasuk says this is what you're supposed to do to the brother who's not going to build his brother's house, right? Kacha yes elish share the spinning and the shoes. So the yivne as base up. Kivin shalabana shalo yivne. Kivin once he didn't do it once. Shuvat lo you shouldn't do it anymore. So therefore, Iu who the kohen left, he has just a lav of lo yivne, right? Lo yivne is like a lav, or it's on a say that came out of a lav. Aval echav kedekayim. They stay with the original isser. It's eishasach shlo makam mitzvah. It's there's no mitzvah to make even anymore because he did the chalitza. They say with the original one, the Allah dida who the kohen now only she only on the where it's a leniency. It's only a lav is only on the one who did the chalitza. Right, or rather only on her, the one who's the chalutza, the woman or the chalutza. There's only a lav lo yivna. But hatzara kadakayim, but Sarah stays with the original isser of eishasach when there's no mitzvah. That's Rish Lakish's opinion. Rabbi Yochanan says, how could that be? Mika miditi mikara. Originally, iboy high chalutz, iboy high. Originally, any of the brothers could have done chalitza, right? That's the rule. You're supposed to be the oldest brother, the oldest surviving brother, is supposed to do chalitza or yibam. But any of the brothers could do it. So anyone could have done it. And he could have been chalitza to any of the wives that Reuven left. Let's say Reuven left 9, 10 wives. Could have done any of them. You're yotza with one. The hashta karl say now you're going to get kares. Now that one brother is getting chalitza to one sister, now you're going to get kares for one of the other brothers marrying one of the other sisters or this particular sister. He is doing the shlichus. The one who did the chalitza is doing the shlichus of all of them, and she's doing the shlichus of one of the wives, one of the co-wives, and therefore he's at each one the two parties, the yavam and the chalutza is acting on behalf of their co-brothers or sisters. And therefore, the same isser applies. There's only an isser of lav, there's no isser of kares. Here he says like this: if you give chalitza to your woman, and then you married her, like we just said, right? Umeis, and then you died, she needs chalitza. Now, if she's a chalitza, it's better. You could do yibam also technically, but you still need chalitza because it was a legitimate marriage. So I say it's only chayv lavin to marry what? It's a lav. Lo yivna. I say it's chayv lavin inu. Hainu tzricha chalitza. We said there's no chorus before, but here he calls it specifically chayv lavin. Right? Hainu tzricha chalitza mina achen. Right? Chalitza mina achen. El bidach. But according to you, on my tzricha chalitza, why does she need chalitza? She doesn't need chalitza because it's not a marriage. It's chayv kares. We said before, Moshe, that what? That if you live with somebody, you try to marry somebody you're chayiv kares for, like your sister or your daughter-in-law or your mother-in-law, it's not chal. So why would you need chalitza? So again, what happened? Why do you need chalitza menachem? The other brothers, according to Rish Lakish, yes, your kedushin works. It's only allowed. But the other brothers can't marry her at all. So why do you need chalitza? Why do you need chalitza? So he asks him back to Rish Lakish, asked to Rabbi Yochanan to make a point to your reason. Look at the Sefer. The Sefer never says, if one of the other brothers, not the one who gave the chalitza, one of the other brothers married her, ain't love klum. There's nothing there at all. Meaning you don't need chalitza, you don't need yibam. If one of the other brothers married her and died, it's not a marriage. Ain't kedushin tovsim, says Rashi. Ain't it tzricha menig? You don't even need to get. Ain't kedushin tovsim chayv krisis. Chayv elavin, and it's only chayv elav, not krisis. Amayin love klum. According to you, it's only chayv elavin. So why do you without them? Rav Sheshis gets out of it, explains. Rabbi Yochanan says, listen, Seif Asom Akiva. The Seif is going Rabbi Akiva, who holds Amar Ein Kedushin Tavsim Chayv Elavin. Rabbi Akiva is the exception. He holds that even if a Kohen marries a Grusha, the Kedushin is not chal. Now only is the kid right? Kedushin not chal, and therefore the kid would be a mamzer. When Kedushin is not chal, that means the kid's a mamzer. Mamzer could also be if you marry a mamzer, right? But the kid be a mamzer. But Ein Kedushin Tavsim Chayv Elavin. The Seif is a Kiva. So that's pretty strange. The Reisha is not Rabbi Kiva in the same. So the listener should say, "L'div Rabbi Kiva and love kum." It should say that. That's takakash. But Rav Ashi says no. I'll explain it. But Rav Ashi holds like Rish Lakish, who says what? That all the other brothers and all the other co-wives, if they marry one another subsequently, that sorrows whatever, chayve krisis kushnachal. He holds like Rish Lakish and Matarasik Reb Shimon, and he explains that it goes according to Reb Shimon. Which Reb Shimon? Reb Shimon, who holds, remember, said yesterday that if a son is born subsequently to Reuven dying, Levi is born subsequent, but also subsequent to Shimon having performed Yibam, Reuven died, no children, right? Shimon married her, and then Levi is born later. Is Levi Eish Zachar Shalom Alama? No. If Shimon then dies with no children, Levi performs Yibum. He's not a Shalom. So he explains like Rav Shimon, we're going to explain in a minute. Ravina Salvar Kabelchan, he holds like Kabelchan, he holds like Kabelchan, what the Kedushin is Chal with all the other brothers marrying all the other wives. And he explains like the Rabbanan, who holds that it's Eshav Shalom Balamo, and that's why it wouldn't be Chal. What do we mean? We're going to explain. Rav Ashi, Salvar Kabelchan, Rav Shimon, Hacholotz Livimta. How do you explain that, Bryson? Hacholotz Livimta B'chaz of a Kitcha. You gave chalitza, then you married her after chalitza, which you're not supposed to do. And then you died with no children. Sricha chalitza, you need chalitza menachem. Why? Because the kedushin's chal. It's only a lav. My achin hayilodim. Which brothers are we talking about? The brothers. What do you mean sricha chalitza menachem? My menachem hayilodim. The brothers are going to be born later on. Levi, who's born late. What does it mean in chalitza? The ones who were born after us. Come on, Reb Shimon. He goes like Reb Shimon. In other words, we're explaining like meaning. Why do you? What do you mean in chalitza? We're saying that the kedushin is not chal, right? Because it's tzricha chalitza menachin. If that same brother, meaning the one who gave chalitza, he marries her. What's the halacha? According to everybody, that's chal. Because even Rav Shimon, even Reish Lakish holds that the brother who gave chalitza, if he made yibum, it's chal, even though it's over a lot. Okay, but now if he dies, the other brothers, according to Rav Shimon, what's the halacha? According to Reish Lakish, what's the halacha? The other brothers, chayiv kares, she shouldn't do chalitza or yibum there. Why? The one's going to be born later on. Levi was born subsequent to the whole story. Reuben died. Shimon married her. Then Levi was born later. Levi or Yehuda, Yisachar, whoever was born later, they have an issue. Why? Because they're only getting Yibam from Shimon, not from Reuben. So that's not Eish Shachim Shalom Alamo. They're like new actors in the play over here. Come on, Reb Shimon. Like Reb Shimon who holds that what? That if there was first Yibam and then the kid's born later on, there is even in that case, that's not Eshav Shalom. But if one of the ones who were born before, one of the brothers who were around, the survivors of Reuben died and he had a brother there before, like Shimon, the kitchen married her, and of Klum, there's nothing there because Chayiv Kares, according to Rish Lakish, if you did Chalitza, the other brothers cannot marry these wives or the Tsar at all. Come on, Rish Lakish. Ravina Savak Rabbi Yochanan, Ravina like Rabbi Yochanan, who says what? That once chalitza is done, either him or any of the other brothers who forms yibam on the marries one of the other sisters or the Rav himself, it works. You're not supposed to, but it works. He also Rabbi also Rabbi Yochanan, Mitzvah Libid Rabbi Yochanan, Libid Rabbanan. Hacholotz the Yevimto because of the kitchen tzricha chalitz manachin yichitz lachen manachin achin alodim. Even the brothers were born already because you need chalitz. Again, Reuven died. Shimon gave her chalitza. Then Shimon married her, right? And then Shimon died. Does she need chalitza from the other brothers? Yes, even the ones who were born before, because Shimon's marriage works. It works according to Rabbi Yochanan. It's not Isser Kars, it's only love. Come on, Rabbi Yochanan. Let's say one of the brothers who were born later on, Levi or Yisachar was born later on, and the kitchen married her, and he married her, then ain't a love klum. Why? Come on, Rabbanan, like the Rabbanan who say, that's a Shishach Shaloy Balamo. Remember, the Rabbanan say that if Reuven died, and even if 30 years passed and Levi was born, right? There's still Eish Tzachim Shalei Balamo. So if Shimon married her, makes no difference if Shimon married her now or married her in between, and Shimon dies and falls to Levi. No, it's Eish Tzachim Shalei Balamo in any case. That's what we mean by the Seifa. So you could explain it both ways. So we have a machlokas here between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. If you did chalitza, and then if you did chalitza, you're not supposed to do anything else anymore. Not you, none of the brothers are supposed to marry any of the women, right? Any of these co-wives. But if you did, everybody holds if you did, it works. But if the brothers did, no. According to Reish Lakish, it doesn't work at all. And even if you did, it doesn't work on the tzara. On the tzara, so once you marry one, the tzara is there's an Isser of Eshesach. According to Reish Lakish. According to Reish Lakish, you can marry her, but you can't marry any of the other ones, and none of the other ones can marry her or the tzaras. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, even if you did chalitza and then you subsequently married her or one of the other sisters, right? Or if any of the brothers married her, one of the sisters, it works. You're not supposed to, but it works. All right, we'll pick it up from Itmar tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem Itmar Habal Yevama Ba'achem Menachem Al Tzarasa Fligiba. That's going to be a machlokes. We'll see you tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem. Today 6:05. We still have 6-7 minutes. Tomorrow it's at 6. Tomorrow it's at 6. Yeah. Purim Sameach.
Can we get something a little bit